Welcome to 2023 and welcome to another episode of Stuff Your Accountant is Not Telling You. We're going to be talking about some exciting things on today's episode. We're going to be talking about your 2023 business financial goals, what you need to be paying attention to, trend analysis, and different things you need to be considering to get your year started out strongly. And we're going to be talking about the tax tea of today. A daycare CEO gets convicted of check kiting. Stay tuned as we dive into this episode. Welcome to another episode of Stuff Your Accountant Isn't Telling You, and Happy New Year from myself and my co-host, Mrs. Terrell Antonio Turner. Welcome, Terrell. Welcome back. How you feeling?
I am good. As you can see, I have my red lights on to calm down. I did a speaking engagement earlier. So I don't know what it is about virtual speaking engagements. It tends to take a lot more energy out of me than doing live ones. But I am great.
Yeah, I think it's probably because you feed off of people's, well, I'll speak for myself. I tend to feed off of people's energy when I'm in person. That sounds like very Twilight vampire-y, but I do tend to feed off of people's energy when I'm in person. So I think it definitely takes a lot more effort when you can't see the people. You still got to keep your engagement going, and all of that's getting communicated on camera. So I can definitely see why that would be a challenge, but I'm sure you did a fantastic job. I'm sure it was awesome. I'm sure people learned a lot of things.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. I mean, I talked about the accounting experience. Because I think it's some of the same stuff we talk about on this show, where it comes down to, a lot of accountants usually end up not being very good because they are only looking at what they do from the perspective of a person who does the accounting. They don't know how to look at things from the customer's perspective or from the end user's perspective. And I'm just like, I tell business owners all the time, if your accountant cannot see what they do from your perspective, that means they don't really understand your business. They're not really trying to understand your business. They're probably not the best people to help you.
When you say if your accountant doesn't see things from your perspective, what does that mean? Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Like, what does that look like in day to day?
So what it looks like is understanding the problems that you're trying to navigate. For example, one of our clients called me this morning and wanted to talk about a few things because they were trying to get a loan. And for me, being able to see it from their perspective is like, hey, this loan will be the thing that allows them to open up a new location, which allows them to move closer to their ultimate goal. And it allows them to be able to, start serving customers in a new market. Now, me being able to understand that, it helps me put it in perspective. It helps me understand how important this is to him. Now, what I've seen from some other accountants is, let's say if that same client called another accountant and said, hey, I need your help. That other accountant is just like, well, man, I didn't plan on doing this. That means I got to do this extra work to, get these extra financial reports. If they're only looking at it from their perspective, they're not going to be in the best position to actually help you, the business owner.
That's good. That's good. And I think that it's so much easier for you give better advice when you understand where your client is coming from, right? So I think that's actually a really, really good point. And I think it's something that a lot of people can oftentimes overlook. And I think it's just when it comes to just life in general, like when you're navigating conversations, and this is something you and I have talked about just on the personal side, when you put yourself in the other person's shoes, it makes getting along with them or getting your point across or whatever it is that you're trying to communicate, it makes it happen so much quicker when people feel like you understand what it is that they're going through. So the same, I think, applies for, accountants and accounting when it comes to managing your relationships.
I totally agree with that point, but that is not why we showed up for today's episode. So, what do we have for today?
Yeah, today I'm excited because I think, it's a new year. Everyone's setting goals for 2023. People are like, man, I have all these things I want to smash, these goals I want to achieve. Specifically, the biggest one that everyone talks about is usually fitness goals. But the goal we're going to talk about today, or the goals we're going to talk about, are your financially fit goals. So, as a business owner, you've finished 2022 strong. You may or may not have liked the way 2022 went for you, but you know what? The great thing about 2023 is it's a new year and it's a new opportunity and a new day for you to change the trajectory of your business. So I'm excited about what we're going to talk about. And I think for us, really, the intent of this episode is really to kind of give you guys, the audience, some context on, some things we feel like are important and some things we've been sharing with our clients about, hey, these are the things that you need to pay attention to, or these are some of the areas you need to focus when you're thinking about really preparing yourself for success in 2023. So the first thing, Terrell, I want to talk about is just, I think right out of the gate, when it comes to setting your, getting your business ready, I think it's important to always look back at the past. So being able to look and see what your business did in 2022, I think is extremely important. So that's usually the first thing that I would say. And so when we talk about looking at what your business did in 2022, what are some of the things that come to your mind, with that point?
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious one from an accounting and finance standpoint is to actually look at your financial statements. Like you want to
Hmm.
look at your profit and loss statement, you want to look at your balance sheet, you want to understand what happened in that year. Now, I would say preferably you want to look at your P&L, like look at it, for the last 12 months and see if there's any trends that jump out to you. Because that'll give you some ideas on, hey, what questions do I need to ask? Like, did we spend too much money on this or that? Or, what actually helped us make money? So I think you want to start off looking at your numbers, because once you start actually looking at the figures, you can step outside of your feelings, because a lot of people just tend to go from year to year. Like, I feel like this was a good year. But I'm
Yeah.
like, well, if we look at the numbers, we'll be able to tell whether it was a good year or not.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point about, not focusing on, the feelings, focusing on the facts. So if you were to give advice to a business owner, and maybe, we can take that's a great thing about having clients, is kind of transfer some of the conversations we've been having with our clients. What would you say would be a good way for them to kind of do a review? Like, hey, Terrell, I'm looking at my income statement, I'm looking at my profit and loss. Like, hey, how do I even start to decipher this? Assuming they don't have an accountant or they just don't have a really good one. How do I kind of start to decipher this? How do I start to kind of assess my performance and look and see, hey, was this good? Was this not? How do I evaluate where there's room for improvement, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, first is, if you're not working with an accountant or a bookkeeper and you're doing the bookkeeping yourself, I hope that you have taken the course I created on how to do your own bookkeeping. Because I think and I point that out because there are quite a bit of people I've seen that are doing their own bookkeeping. But then when we
Mhm.
look and I tell them what financial reports to look at, they go look at it and they're like, well, I just don't understand it. And then when I look at it, I'm just like, I see why you don't understand it. There's a lot of stuff that's not in the right place. And it's
Yeah.
not because you're a bad person. It's just you didn't understand how to do the bookkeeping. So when you look at the reports, it doesn't mean as much. So I'm going to
Yeah.
caveat. I say that to add this caveat. If your bookkeeping has been handled effectively throughout the year, the things I would say look at is you want to look at your revenue, and preferably look at your revenue by product type, so we can understand what types of products or services actually generated the income that you made that year. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to spend so much time thinking like, well, I feel like this is a really good money maker. I'm like, well, let's
Yeah.
just go actually look at the numbers and
Right.
see, does that product or service actually make you money? And is that something you should keep you doing in 2023? Or should you just be like, you know what, we're not doing that anymore?
Yeah, on the revenue piece that you made, I think that's a really good point because I think it's easy for people to fall in love with their products. I mean, I know I go through those. I've had some of those challenges where you get really, really excited. I mean, for me, I can think about it as an example with just the stuff that I'm editing or stuff that I'm putting out or the content. It's easy to fall in love with an idea, and I think once you fall in love with it, then you might think, hey, this is the best product that I'm selling. This is the best product for the market. But in reality, your numbers are going to tell you the truth, and your numbers may be telling you something completely different from what what you think or you feel like the numbers should look like from a revenue standpoint.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think the average business owner that I talk to, when we look at when we really look at their numbers, and beforehand, I'll ask them, like, hey, what do you think is like your top selling product? They'll tell me what their answer is. I'm like, well, what do you think is your most profitable product? Oftentimes, they will pick the same product. Then, when we look
Mhm.
into the numbers, what I often find is, well, the product you thought was your top seller is not the top seller.
That's
And
good.
when we start looking at profitability, we do a gross margin analysis. What we start realizing is what you thought was a top seller is actually something you don't make that much money on. And
That's a yeah.
then light bulbs go off for them.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. I think I'm going to put that as a quote. Your top selling product isn't always your most profitable product because it's so true. And I've seen this even in conversations that I've had with people on the sales team where they're just pushing one product over the other because hey, they felt like customers love this product or it's easy for them to sell the product. But then when they go back and look at the margins for the product, it's not really giving them as much margin as, they thought, or they're just not really paying attention to it, and ultimately that impacts the profitability of your business.
Absolutely. I mean, and some of it may be a business strategy. Like, for example, if you're looking at a gas station, the convenience store is not making that much money on the gasoline that they sell.
Mhm.
But they sell that as the product to get you in the door.
Right.
And you may have that as part of your strategy. So if you look at a gas station, you'll realize their number one selling item is the gasoline. But then when you do the profitability analysis, you'll realize the gasoline is not the most profitable thing that they sell. There's something else. And you won't find that out for your business unless you're actually looking at the numbers.
That's a really good point because I think I see that even when people position products where they'll give you something for free or they'll give you something at a really low price and then you come and then they ask, "Hey, do you want to buy this? Do you want to buy that?" And the prices kind of just progressively go up. And so that's actually a really good point. A lot of times it may be a strategy to kind of bring you in. The last point that I want to make, Terrell, that you made kind of on the 2022, just reviewing your actuals and trends. I think another area or another point to consider as a business owner is I think sometimes we tend to forget what we're spending money on, right? So by that I mean, you might have stuff that you subscribed to last year, stuff that you signed up for last year, things that you're paying for that you honestly don't really remember or that you are no longer using. And ideally, this is something that your accountant should be helping you with, or you should be reviewing if it's quarterly or if it shouldn't be like a, end of the year thing. But from my perspective, but if you are at the point where, hey, you're looking at your 22 actuals and your spend, my recommendation is to kind of divide your expenses into, let's just say, three categories, is my point. One would be, hey, these are things that help me make money. So, for example, if you are, let's say, a law firm and you have, law firm management software, like that's helping you make money or that's actually being used to help you generate revenue. And then you have stuff that are essential. So, like things that might not necessarily help you generate or directly tie to your revenue, but you need those things to run your business. And then the third thing I would say, are you have like the nice to have things. So, like if you have maybe a subscription or you have subscription to things or, meals or just different things like that that are nice to have. And I know we've had conversations about this. All of that stuff is debatable, right? You as a business owner kind of need to decide what's in your, well, revenue generating should be pretty clear cut, you know, things that are essential, a little bit subjective, and then things that are nice to have, all of that kind of goes, in different buckets. Because when you do that, then you can really look at your spend and say, you know what, I probably don't need 2 Netflix subscriptions, or you know what, I probably don't need to have, a subscription in my office for Netflix, or hey, this music subscription I'm paying for on YouTube Music, just as an example, what, people come into the office and they're not even paying attention to this, or hey, I can get a free playlist on YouTube. I don't know, whatever it is. But those, I think, are important things to consider when it comes to looking at your cost. And for me, Terrell, I think like that's something we've talked about in the past, but I think a lot of times people just are like, the expenses are what the expenses are, and they just move forward with that.
Nope, I agree. I agree. I do think the expenses are a good area to look at. I mean, and even if you got to go old school, make you a nice little mixtape.
Yeah, exactly. Because these subscription prices just keep climbing gradually. So hey, whatever you can do to save costs, please go ahead and do it. But yeah, so that's the first thing. Setting, looking at your 2022 goals, your 2022 spend, your P&L, your income statement, your balance sheet, all of those. So once you do that, then you're ready to set your 2023 goals. And I think this part is important for a couple of reasons. I would say one, Terrell, for me, I think it's just having a clear direction of like what it is that you want to work towards. So if you were to think about like goals or 2023 goals, like how would you recommend like business owners go, especially when it comes to financial goals? Like how would you recommend, what is a good goal to have? A clear good goal to have?
Yeah, I think all your goals should be something that is actionable, something that you can actually look at this and say, okay, all right, I know how to go take action on this. Now, I end up doing this a lot with different business owners. We call them like CFO strategy sessions. And we usually charge about $750 to do a session like this. And this is where we really start to dig in and say, okay, all right, what's a goal that you have? Like one client said, hey, well, we want to make, we want to generate X amount of dollars in revenue. Like we wanted to get our business to $450,000 a year in revenue. And then what we did is we broke that down and said, okay, all right, what's the average price of your products and services? We did the math and did look through the data, came up with that answer, said, okay, all right, you want to do 450,000 a year. Your average product is priced at X, divided it. And what that told me is you need to sell X number of units the entire year. How do we start breaking that down? So let's say Q1, how many do you need to sell? Q2, how many do you need to sell? Q3 and Q4. And then what that came back is it gave them an actionable goal of saying, I need X number of customers by Q1. I need X number of customers in Q2. I need X number of customers in Q3. And from that, then we can take the step and look at their marketing to say, okay, all right, let's look at your conversions. Now we can kind of plan out how much money do you need to spend in marketing for you to hit those numbers? And then also, how many employees do you need? So we can start building everything from the bottoms up. So that person had a very clear goal of, all right, here are the 5 things that I need to do to make sure I can get this many customers to show up in Q1, which means I will be on track to hit the real money goal that I want to hit by the end of the year.
That's really good. I agree with that point, and I agree with just kind of the walk back is what I call it, where you have your big goal of, hey, your main goal, you're trying, let's say, I don't know, you're trying to increase your revenue by, let's say, 20% year over year. You kind of need to walk it back to, okay, what does that mean in terms of sales? How many units do I have to sell of X? How many services? How many sessions do I have to have? How many of those do I need to promote on a weekly basis? Which ones do I need to promote? So you kind of backtrack and walk back to kind of start at the first step that you would need to do to make sure that you eventually reach that goal. I think that's a really good point. The other thing also, Terrell, that I kind of think about is just, I've done this. I've fallen victim to this, is just having these really, really big goals. And sometimes like the goals haven't necessarily really even been worth my attention or worth my time. So financially, like what would you think like is one goal where you're just like, all right, like you don't really need to be focused on doing that right now? And I think it varies for every business. So maybe we can kind of talk about for us personally, or maybe what we've seen with our clients, like identifying what's really worth your attention for this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on like what your, what your target is. Like, for example, I've seen some people to say, "Hey, I want to double the size of my business." I'm like, okay. And then they'll come back and say, I want to take, 50 days off, or hey, I want to take, 2 months off. I'm like, okay, all right. Though, unless you have a really good strategy for doubling your business, those two goals may be in competition. And I do
Yeah.
think sometimes what people do is they pick this random goal and it's in competition with other goals. For example, one of the things that a lot of business owners say is like, hey, well, I want to invest in the growth of my business more and I want to save money. So,
Mm,
which one is going to take priority? Because at some point, those two goals are going to collide with one another. And I think if you're setting non-compatible goals, then I would say is you're probably going to be wasting your time. Because I do think that any goal, I always tell people, is any goal is attainable. But if you're going to have more than one goal, you need to actually prioritize them, like which one is more important. For example, when we were working on some growth in our business, we were like, hey, we needed to hire more people. And
mhm.
at the same time, we were like, hey, we want our gross margin to be at X. Well, at some point during the hiring process, our gross margin wasn't there because we needed to get our people on board. They weren't able to support clients, themselves. So they were doing a lot more training. So they weren't as productive in the beginning. And so I'm just like, we had to realize getting our new employees on boarded was more important than us hitting the gross margin goal at that time. And so I think that as you set goals, is don't set competing goals. And if you do have competing goals, you have to be clear about, okay, which one takes precedence, because you're going to have to pick one or the other at certain points. Now, eventually you'll be able to do them all, but
Mhm.
sometimes I think you do have to make a trade-off decision.
Yeah, and I think in addition to what you said, I think you made a really good point on just not setting competing goals and, being able to prioritize those goals. A third thing that I would say is like the point that you made about kind of understanding that if I do X, like Y is going to happen. So like if I'm focused
Yeah.
on hiring and growing my team, like my gross margin is going to take a hit for a little bit until I can kind of get my revenue back to compensate, or get my increase my revenue to compensate for that hire. So I think the point is, in addition to not setting competing goals. And in addition to the other point that you made, Terrell, about just, prioritizing, I think also understanding the connection between your goals, because I think sometimes people just set all these goals and they don't understand there's like a domino effect. Like you can't just do this without this being impacted. And I think understanding the connection will kind of help you not beat yourself up as a business owner if you get midway through the year and let's say your goal is, hey, you want to hire more, or you want to grow your business. Growing your businesses may require you to hire more staff, and at the same time you want to grow your gross margin by X. Like you need to understand, hey, for a time period, based on what I'm trying to do, my gross margin might not be where it needs to be. But if you don't understand that, you're just going to be frustrated and beating yourself up about why you're not achieving those goals, and it kind of takes away the progress away from the progress that you might be making on one goal versus the other.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, because I think that a lot of people get stuck with that,
Mhm.
about, they've set competing goals like, hey, I want to open up another location and I want to take more time off. It's like, well,
That ain't
unless you have
happening.
a really good strategic plan,
Right.
both of those aren't going to happen at the same time. And
Or
so,
enough, or enough money to bring somebody on to help you manage that opening. That's another
yeah,
option.
I mean, and I think that plays into having a good, strategic plan.
Mhm.
Because I think that's probably after setting goals. I mean, I think that's where I tend to tell people, let's spend some more time there on let's creating a true strategic plan, because that's where reality starts to set in and we start to ask ourselves some of those trade-off questions. And then during that exercise, we start realizing, like, yeah, I set this goal, but that goal really isn't that important. I don't need to focus on that. I need to focus on these three things. Because I
Right.
think for any business owner is whenever you're setting goals in your business, you really want to narrow it down to what are the important goals that I need to focus on. Like, don't just go and say, hey, I watched this YouTube video. This person said I should have this goal. That doesn't matter. What you need to
Right.
focus on is, what do I really want? What resources do I have available to me? Like, what's a realistic timeline? And then what are I'd say, 3 to 4 things that I need to be super focused on to make sure that we're making good progress.
Yeah, and I think you made such a good point on not letting other people drive your goals, because you could be inspired, but understand that your business is unique and your business is different. So you can't just take some YouTube video and be like, all right, I'm going to go do this. And I think that's why we really emphasize on like understanding your numbers, because you need to understand what's working for your business, like the state that your business is in. And you need to make decisions based on your business's data. You might not be able to do, some of the other things that other business owners are doing, but that's okay. As long as you understand what is needed for your business, it makes it a lot easier, because you can make decisions that are actually going to make a lasting impact, or decisions that are actually going to help grow your business or improve it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anything else you want to say on setting goals?
No, I think we've kind of we have dove, is that the right conjugation? We've dove into every all of the points. I think you touched on this other part some, Terrell, where we talked about just being creating a strategic financial plan. Like, we've talked about the what, and now like talking about the how. You touched about, I think you touched on it earlier in the conversation, just when you were talking about like kind of working your way back or mapping your goal to say,
Mhm.
okay, this is what I need now, these are the things that I need to do, and I'm breaking kind of that bigger goal into smaller targets. So I think that's kind of a good next step of, what the audience should focus on.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the strategic financial plan is it's a game changer because what
Mm,
it does is it takes you from your goal and we walk backwards into what do you need to actually do this week to
mm,
make sure that you're headed in that right direction. And one, like, I guess an analogy I would think about is, let's say, if you're taking a road trip, we decide we're going to go from, you know, North Carolina, and we're going to drive to Las Vegas. We got the destination. What you end up doing is working your way back, mapping out your route. Like, which roads are we going to take? What highways are we going to take? And you can get even more specific. What streets are we going to take to get to the main highway? And what states are we going to drive through and stuff like that? And I think a lot of people fail to do that with their business, where they just say, hey, I want to be $1 million business. Okay, how are you going to do that? Like, what do
mm.
you need to do? Like, to get from where you are today to get to that goal, what needs to happen? And I think until you sit down and really lay out the strategic plan, I think your big goal is just going to be a dream that you would like to hit, but it will probably not become a reality.
Yeah, and it's going to lead to a lot of disappointment, because I mean, I got to be honest, just giving a more personal example, I tend to be between both of us, I tend to kind of be more focused on just the excitement of the dream. Like, man, we're just going to go do this and we're going to go do that. And sometimes I think, it's easy to get so excited about the bigger goal that you don't set actionable tasks. Like, what do you need to start doing today? Because then what happens is you get to the mid of 2023, you're like, dang, like, I'm not making any progress. But in reality, then you have to honestly ask yourself, like, have I really been doing anything to work towards this goal that I have? And so I think for me, I tend sometimes to get very excited about the idea and the possibility of the end goal. But in that excitement, it doesn't really carry to like the individual level detail execution. And honestly, I'm learning it's so important, because I think the other thing, Terrell, that I've realized is it definitely helps alleviate the stress when you have to do, like, if your goal is to grow, I don't know, 20, 15%. And based on these actionable tasks that you need to talk to 5 people a week, or you need to talk to, 10 people a week, whatever the numbers, or 2 people a week, like that's a lot better than getting, halfway through the year and being like, man, I haven't talked to anybody. Now you're sprinting, you're frustrated, you feel like a failure because you haven't achieved any of the goals that you have. And I think definitely, Terrell, the strategic like planning is so important to actually see that materialize and to actually see that progress. And then I think it also kind of helps you like feel like you're actually making progress, which is important.
Yeah, no, I think it is very true. I mean, it's so relieving. Like yesterday, I did a call with a client, and they had a question about like, hey, should I use this compensation strategy or this? Should I pay them a bonus or commission, or should I do hourly? That was their only question that they had. But what they didn't realize is, I'm like, okay, let's take your question. Now, there's some other things I asked them. And within about 45 minutes, what we went from just that question to me asking them some questions and digging a little bit more to where we identified they wanted to be able to make $10,000 a month from their business in profit. And I was like, okay, let's work backwards. So by the end of that 45 minutes, they had absolute clarity of they knew how many employees they needed to hire. And then they also knew how many customers each employee needed to be able to see each week. And then we broke it down to by day to where they knew, hey, in order for me to hit this goal, for me to be able to cover my costs, pay my people, and me to be able to make $10,000, my team needs to be seeing 4 people a day between Tuesday and Friday, and then 6 people a day on Saturday and Sunday. And them being able to see a very clear picture, they were like, oh my gosh, I now know what to go do. Like before, I was just like, feeling uncomfortable about this. But with this plan, in a matter of 45 minutes, they said, I have more clarity in this 45 minutes than I have in the past 6 months of trying to work with other people. But they were like, this meeting has not only given me clarity, but it also made me excited because these numbers are very doable. And I think that's the benefit you get from getting a true strategic plan, is breaking it down to where you have clarity, and it also brings excitement, and it allows you to be able to set some very clear, targets or milestones so that you can stay on pace to move towards your ultimate objective.
So I just want to insert a little plug here. This is why we are one of the best, accountants, because we provide that level. I mean, can you imagine calling your accountant and being like, hey, I just want to know, what I should do, my compensation strategy should be for this employee. And in 45 minutes, you actually have actionable goals that you can go take to make sure that you're hitting your $10,000 a month in profit target. I mean, who does that? The best. Yeah. Okay. So now back to the point.
I mean, and the thing is, I do this even with ourselves, like, some new products or new services that we were looking at launching. Like while on the call, like we had a call with the marketing team. While on the call with the marketing team, I'm listening to what they're saying. Within 15 minutes, I was able to take what they said, what I knew, I was able to put it in a plan, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I see it. Here's how we're going to get to a $2 million business based on what they're saying. I know the exact numbers, and it's all nailed down. And it only took me 15 minutes to do it, because I think once you get comfortable with being able to take the information you have and really get good at creating a strategic plan, you walk away with so much clarity. Now, the marketing team knows exactly what I expect. I know what I need to do. They know what they need to do. And then the results are going to work itself out because both of us have clarity on what we need to do. And one of the things that was very surprising is I'm like, oh, wow, this is only going to take 10 months to get to a $2 million business with this strategy. And let's say it takes a little bit longer. let's say it takes, 13 months, 14 months, 15 months. But I'm like, 15 months to create a $2 million a year business. And the margins were very attractive. But I
Yeah.
think it really just comes down to, how do you take what you're trying to achieve and boil it back down to, hey, what are the specific things that I need to do for this to become a reality?
Yeah, and I can personally say and give a testimonial right now is when we were in that conversation with the marketing team and they were talking about some of those CAC stuff, and I was just like, I like, what is this? Okay, like I'm familiar, but it did feel a little bit overwhelming. I will say after we put that sheet together and actually went through it, and you were like, hey, this is what the numbers are. I'm like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. So there's just that clarity. There's a level of clarity that really comes with just being able to look at the numbers implemented on a practical, actionable step. Like you talked about the strategic financial plan. This is what you need to go do. And now we know, okay, these are the results we need to get, in order to make sure that we're hitting that target. And I think it's just so exciting. It like you said, it adds that level of excitement back into the process, because when you're not certain about where you're headed, then you're just kind of like, okay, am I going the right way? Am I doing the right thing? Because you don't have anything to measure back against to see if you're failing or succeeding at what you're doing. So kudos to you for doing that for our business, and kudos to you for doing that for our clients. So well
Absolutely.
done.
I mean, and I think that kind of leads us into the fourth and final point. I mean, I think
Hmm.
we've alluded to it some, is just establishing those milestones. So if you have a true, strategic financial plan, the milestones become easy, because I'll go back to the
Exactly.
example of, if we're taking a road trip, we're driving from North Carolina to Las Vegas, Nevada. The milestones are going to be the let's say the states. We know that,
Hmm.
hey, by the time we get to Tennessee, we know where we are. Hey, if we hit Texas, we know we're headed in the right direction. If we hit this city, we know that we're headed in the right direction, because by looking at those milestones, I can tell whether we're on track. Because
Right.
if we're driving from North Carolina to Las Vegas, if I look up and find that we're somewhere in northern Kentucky, I'm like, hey, we're headed the wrong direction.
Exactly. No, that's a really good point. And I think another thing, Terrell, is just there's excitement that comes with knowing that you're closer to your goal, right?
Yeah.
There's just the excitement that comes with knowing you're closer to your destination. Like if you have a 25-hour drive, and every time you see that number reduce slightly, especially when it gets into the single digits, like if you have a 10-hour drive and you just kind of see it drop into the single digits, now you have a 5-hour drive, it definitely makes it exciting, because you can celebrate the milestones. But again, if you don't have anything, what are you going to celebrate? Because you're just going to
Yeah.
feel like you haven't arrived, and you're just going to be frustrated. It's going to be like, are we there yet? Are we that Ice Cube movie? Are we there yet? You're just going to be asking, and you're just going to be getting the answer of like, no, but you don't know how close you are to your goal because you don't have any milestones.
Yeah, I mean, that is very true, and that's something that I've had to develop as a leader, because I
Mm,
haven't always been great at that. Because I can see where we're going, and I have an exceptional level of confidence and faith that I can work for a very long time and still be excited without seeing any results. But one of the things that I realized when working with the rest of the team, even with you being on the team and the rest of our staff, like, they may not have the same tolerance for working for a long time without seeing results. Like, for
yeah, I need
myself,
to
it's like,
celebrate. I need
I
to see some
could
progress.
like I could probably go in the zone and work for 2 years with no results and still be fine and still be just as confident that we're going to get there. What I
Mhm.
realize is other people, they need to see results on a monthly, some people need to see results on a quarterly, some people need to see results like every other month or whatever. And what I had to do was take a step back of saying, like, I can go grind for 2 years and be perfectly fine, but the rest of the team isn't that way. So as a leader, I had to step back and say, okay, all right, what are the milestones that we need to have in place so the rest of the team knows that, hey, we're still headed in the right direction. We're not there yet, but hey, we hit mile marker number 3, or hey, we hit
Mhm.
mile marker number 4. And I think that as a leader, when you're trying to grow your business, you definitely need to develop that. And then we started to develop that even with our clients, because sometimes when a client comes to us and they're like, hey, my accounting is really messed up or it's really jacked up, like it's going to take us a lot of work to clean it up. But
Yeah.
sometimes what we have to do is tell them like, hey, there are 3,000 transactions we need to get through. We've made it past 1,000. Hey, we've made it past 2,000. Hey, we've made it past 2,800. These last 200, we need some help from you on filling in the gaps on what this stuff is. And I think by people being able to see progress, it keeps them engaged and excited that, hey, we are going to get to that end destination.
No, that's really good. That's really good. And I, as someone who likes to celebrate the progress, I can definitely attest to that. I think, the good thing about having those goals is you can celebrate the progress, but you still keep moving because you're not at your end destination yet. So, any final thoughts, Terrell, before we wrap this episode up?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as we talked about the objectives are: new year, you want to review your results for the prior year, view your 2022 results, which should be pretty easy if it's already done. If you're not, if you've been doing the bookkeeping yourself or you're working with a bookkeeper, that one should be pretty easy. Pull up your information. Now, if you go to look at your numbers and you're like, I don't know what I'm looking at, you need to give us a call.
Yep.
Actually, what you should do is join the small business CFO program that we do. Because what we'll do is we'll help you learn how to understand and interpret your numbers so you can make great decisions. And if you're like, hey, I need somebody to really help, clean up this stuff, this accounting stuff, give us a call. We can help with that. So you'll be able to confidently review your numbers for the prior year. And then also you want to set goals. Is what are the goals that you want to achieve? And then you want to get a good, strong financial strategic plan. If you don't know how to do that, again, join the small business CFO program. I mean, for $250 a month, you get us actually doing a live walkthrough on how to do this, where we go in way more details and we're answering questions live. And if you say, hey, I want to hire somebody to do it for me, hey, we can help you with that too. So, find someone who can help you create a strategic financial plan. And then I think the last thing is make sure that strategic financial plan has some milestones. So you have incremental things that you can measure yourself against to say whether you're on track. And I think if you're doing those 4 things, 2023 is realistically going to be a much better year for you and your business.
Yes, and that's what we wish for all of our clients and all of our small business CFO program members. So, and of course, our listeners. So, we wish you guys an awesome 2023. We are so excited to dive into more exciting content. And like Terrell said, if you're looking for some financial guidance, if you need help from, hey, professional expert CFOs like ourselves, join our group, and we promise you will get more than value that you can ever imagine. So don't go at it by yourself when you can go at it with the team and you can go at it with the community. So with that being said, thank you for tuning in to another episode. And now we're going to dive into our tax tea of the week. So Terrell, I'm excited about this one. It's a little bit I don't know how to, it's a lot. Okay. So let me just start with this one. So okay.
So I would say, before you jump into the details, what was the do we know the penalty that this person got?
30 years. They're gonna be getting 30 years.
They're gonna be 30 years in prison for their shenanigans, their financial
30
shenanigans.
30 years in prison for their shenanigans. And I'm going to tell you, we've done quite a few tax teas so far. Okay, maybe like 4. And I'm not going to lie, I don't feel bad for this one. The other ones that we did, I was like, maybe they would have made mistakes and, maybe I can understand how they would have omitted and missed the stuff. But this one, I have no sympathy for this person. And the reason why is basically this daycare CEO owner, based in Georgia. She was, and keep me honest here, Terrell, I want to make sure I pronounce it correctly. She was basically using I mean, between not reserving, and the employer portion or the employee, she was collecting taxes from the employees. So like basically, their Medicare, Social Security, or Social Security withdrawals, she was taking all that and reserving it and collecting it from the employees that she had in her business, but then she wasn't actually paying this to the IRS. So that's one issue.
So you're saying, so when the employees
Withholding.
got their paycheck, the
Yep.
taxes were taken out
Yep.
and she just wasn't handing that over to the IRS.
That is correct. She was not
Wow.
paying the
Okay.
IRS. I think she did this over a period. I think it was 2 or 3 years. I don't remember the exact number of years, but she was not. She was pocketing that money in her pockets and she was not paying the IRS. That was offense number 1. Offense number 2. This is the one where I'm like, all right, I feel no remorse for you. She was tax, is it kiting or basically check kiting?
Yeah, kiting.
Is kiting the right word? Yeah. So she was check kiting. And for those that don't know what check kiting is, basically what she was doing is she would take a check, and I'll just give an example. Let's say her name is Deborah. Okay. I hope her name's not really Deborah, but let's say her name is Deborah. I mean, at this point, it's on the news. So Deborah she would take let's say $1,000 check, and she would deposit $1,000 check into bank account A. Then she would take another check and write it and deposit another $1,000 check, basically pulling money from the account that she just deposited into. And basically what she was doing is, think about it like musical chairs. So you put money in here, you write a check in here, and when you write a check, usually what happens, like most people know, you have what you call a floating period. So from the moment you deposit the check to when it actually becomes available in your account, there's that period where the money is still what they call floating. And so what she was doing is she was writing a check, depositing a check that basically didn't have money in an account she was using. She was depositing it, let's say bank account A, and then she was turning around and writing another check out of that same bank account to another bank account. And then what she would do is she would then go during that floating period and withdraw cash. And so now what happens is you're writing one check to pull money from an account where there's no money. And then you're basically doing the same thing for the other account. Everything is pending. So you can still go to your ATM and pull money out. But in reality, by the time the other banks catch it, there's no money in the account. So none of those transactions are actually real. Does that make sense?
Wow.
Make sure
yeah.
So basically, yeah, go ahead.
So I was gonna say is, I mean, this is this sounds like a very intentional thing.
It is. That's
sound like a accidental situation. Like, oh, I accidentally wrote a fraudulent check, deposited in this one, then move the money to this one, then move the money here. Like, this looks like a well thought out scheme.
It is. It is. And let me tell you why I don't feel bad for this person at all. In the process of doing these checks and also transfers of fake money and all that stuff she was doing, she attempted to transfer over $75 million between, she had like, I think 12 or 13 bank accounts. And again, keep in mind, this is a person that runs a daycare. Okay. There's a daycare CEO. I don't know if she had any other businesses or whatever, but she attempted to transfer, which I'm like, this is probably where you were not smart, because that's a lot of money and that's definitely going to cause a red flag. So I don't know if she did it over a series of multiple years, but in total, $75 million in false transfers between accounts. And then she would go try to withdraw the money. So that's one piece. The other piece is, so she successfully withdrew, like the check kiting that I talked about, $2 million in check kiting transactions. And all of those transactions, I think they said, lost Bank of America, which was one of the banks that she was using to do this little fraud scheme, lost them $500,000. So basically, there were transactions where she deposited checks where the money wasn't existing. And by the time like she did it with Bank of America and they stopped the transaction, at that point, she's already withdrawn the money. And so in total, she lost Bank of America. It says $500,000 in money, in cash. So she either withdrew it or she deposited, cashed a check that didn't exist for money. So it was just a hot mess. So this is exactly why I say I don't feel sorry for her. So she did plead guilty. This case happened in November. She did plead guilty. And so she's facing up to, at this point, she's probably been convicted because we're in January, going into January. But I mean, honestly, like she did plead guilty and she's facing up to 30 years in prison. And catch this. This is the caveat for me. Guess what? Guess what? She
What's up?
did she did her own bookkeeping. She
Oh,
managed all of the financials for herself.
wow.
Yeah, yeah. She was her own bookkeeper. So she didn't have an accountant checking her stuff because I can already tell you an accountant will be like,
Wow.
this is super shady, super illegal. She may have even, she probably, I wouldn't be surprised if she tried to go to people and they were like, I don't want anything to do with this. So the
Wow.
IRS actually tells us she managed all of the financial affairs for the daycare. She managed all of the financial affairs, basically processed her employee payroll and all of those things. And she admitted in court to basically trying to run a scam on these banks. So I have no remorse for you. I have no remorse. You were doing your own accounting very incorrectly. I'm like, the IRS actually didn't say if she filed any
Wow.
tax returns, but you're doing your own bookkeeping. You're running these little scams on the side. You're withholding employees, withholdings. You're taking money out of their paycheck, but you're not claiming it to the IRS. Like, at what point did you think that you were going to get away with this? I think it only took them 2 years to find out. So it wasn't like she was doing this like elaborate scheme for years. It was like 2018, I think 2019 was the 2 years where she pulled this off. And I'm like, lady, I have no remorse for you. Zero.
Wow,
Zero.
that is pretty bad. I mean, because one of the things that I would say when I hear this and I think about this for business owners, or why I think this matters, is there
Mm,
are a lot of business owners that I know that have employees and they're using some type of payroll service, and they think that everything's being handled well, like the money
mhm.
that's being withheld from people's check is being processed well, but it's not. Now, this lady was intentionally doing something,
Oh,
but
yeah.
there have been several businesses that I've seen where the payroll service, and I'm not going to say the name of the company, but there was one of our clients before they started working with us, they were using a payroll service provider, and that payroll service provider had some serious errors where they were withholding money from the employee's check, but that company wasn't handing the money over to the IRS.
Mm,
So our client, by the time they became a client of ours, they got this letter from the IRS saying, hey, you owe X amount of dollars. He's like, well, what do I owe this for? Like, they were, and then when we dug into it, we realized like the payroll company that they were using was
shady.
not actually handing the money over to the IRS. So it was just it was a mess. And so
Shady.
this is one of those areas that I think that, you know, maybe not to the same magnitude of this lady, but this is why I think if you have employees and you're running payroll as a business, I think you need to have a conversation with someone who actually understands this, that
Mhm.
knows how to look at your form 940s, 941s, and the W-4s and the tax rate, just to make sure that stuff is happening correctly. Because I remember there was another friend of mine in New York, like there was a business that called him because they got a letter from the IRS that said they owed $90,000.
Oof.
And it was because that someone was doing the payroll. Like they had somebody in their office, like an office administrator that was running the payroll. That person didn't know what they were doing. They weren't paying the payroll taxes.
Mm,
And the owner thought it was being done. So the owner was just, spending the money, running the business, but they didn't realize, hey, by the time they got to the end of the year, $90,000 needed to go to the IRS. And I'm just
mm.
like, yeah, you could have avoided that had you had a person who knew what they were doing, just to take a look at it, just to make sure you guys were on the right path.
Man, $90,000. If you make a quarter of a million, or if you make $500,000 a year, you're going to fill that $90,000. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's unfortunate, but hey, this is why we say it's important to work with somebody who knows what they are doing. And with that said, that wraps up our tax
Well,
tea of the week. What else?
let me say
Go ahead,
one
sir.
final thing. Even
Go
for
ahead.
the people, let's say, even for the people, if you are employed by a company, what you want to, I mean, because this situation also impacts the employees. Because I
That's
mean,
true.
if you think about it from one perspective, the money's being withheld from their check. as the employee, you believe that your employer is doing the right thing, handing the money over to the IRS. So when it was time for those employees to file their tax return, and those employees put on their paperwork, I paid X amount of dollars in taxes, the IRS is going to look at that and say, we don't have that money from you. You haven't paid.
That's a good point.
So not only did this, jack her situation up, the employees were also jacked up to where the employees are now going to get a surprise bill because their money wasn't being sent to the IRS and it wasn't being properly handled, to where I'm just like, yeah, if you're running a business and you have employees or you hire contractors, just have a conversation with an accountant who understands it to make sure you are not creating a problem for you and the people that you employ.
That is a fantastic point, because I don't think anybody should have to pay for anybody else's indiscretion. But the reality is, in that situation, maybe what sparked it was people were getting, her employees were getting bills like, nope, we did not get your tax payment, or they were audited and they were like, yeah, this does not look right. But either way, I'm so glad she got what was coming. I feel really bad for the employees who had to kind of go through that. And I think it's just, at the end of the day, like you said, that was a really, really good point, is making sure that you do what's right. Because at the end of the day, you're playing with people's lives. These are employees that, had trusted and entrusted that she was doing the right thing. And now, they were put in very compromising positions. So very good point there.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I will say is thank you guys so much for tuning in today. It's been a pleasure. Until next time.
Hey, it's your girl, Tia Robertson. I'm the host of Entrepreneur Insider. Every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern for entrepreneurs and news that you need to know about. See you there.
Welcome to What's Going On? My name is Demita Joe. Each Wednesday, you can find me here at 3 p.m. I'll be over here discussing different things that are going on and try to bring you a boost of positivity for your week, because we all need this. We're going to share some feel-good stories. We might find a hometown hero. We may take a look at some trending topic. And sometimes we might even find a lesson in a not-so-warm and fuzzy story if we can. I'm Demeter Joe, and I'll see you guys on the next episode right here on What's Going On?